Hi everybody, it's me, Dion Nicole, also known as the Ladydee. Thank you for joining me today. Welcome back to our channel. We're just here to motivate and encourage you. So if that's what you need, then please like, share the video, and subscribe. Today, we're talking about setting boundaries. What does that mean? How do you do it? Are there consequences to it? Can you do it without feeling guilty? Oh yes, we'll break it all down and more right here on Dion Nicole Inspire. Stay tuned. Setting boundaries. So, what is a boundary? First of all, a boundary is a limit. It's a limit. It's a space between you and the other person. It's a line in the sand that cannot be crossed. So what it means to set a boundary is to establish that limit, to establish that line in the sand. How much energy will you allow something or a situation to consume you? So it's important that we establish healthy boundaries so that we will have productive lives and relationships. Setting boundaries are good for everyone because they remind the person of how they feel, what their standards are, what their morals are, their beliefs. But before you can set these boundaries, you must establish what is it that you really believe? What is it that you really stand for? What are your standards and morals for your life? And it's important to really think about that and believe what you set as your boundaries. Otherwise, they're of no use because you won't feel them worthy enough to stand up for. So you have to be careful not to give so much of yourself away. That's why it's important to establish boundaries in your life. Always think of yourself first, which is not selfish, it's self-full. It's loving yourself enough. So who do you set these boundaries with? Sometimes we set boundaries with our friends, with our loved ones, with our coworkers, even with family members. It just doesn't matter. Anyone who is crossing your moral standards needs to be checked. And we'll talk about how to do that better through a couple of clips I would like to share with you from two different sources. And I will note those sources in my description and link the full video in my comments. But I will leave you different ideas of how to set these boundaries from these two sources just to keep it interesting and to give you another source of reference. So what I'll tell you is it might be helpful to make a list of your boundaries. It might be helpful to have a deep talk with yourself, to really dig in and think about what you stand for. It's important to know because you are the creator of your destiny. And the way that you get to your destiny is by keeping in mind who needs to be in your path. And you have to keep a mental awareness of what's eating you or what's taking away from what you need for yourself. So that's why it's important to set boundaries. And do you step on some people's toes when you do it? Perhaps. But is it yet important? Yes, indeed. Now there are 5 main boundaries that you can set, or categories I would say. And these are your personal boundaries, your physical boundaries, your mental boundaries, your emotional boundaries, and your spiritual boundaries. All of these are very important and equally important for you to pay attention to. We must understand that whatever the level the person is in our life, it's still important to set that boundary, whether it's a stranger to a close friend or a family member. Your peace is important, and whoever or whatever situation tramples on that peace should give you a warning that this is crossing my boundary. One of my favorite sayings is, you do have to teach a person how to treat you. That is real. If you don't, you'll get trampled on out in these streets and out in this world. So then the question becomes, how do I let someone know what my boundaries are? And what do I do if my boundaries are crossed? That is what I'm going to share with you in the clips that are coming up. And that's a very important question. So just to touch on why it's so hard for people to set boundaries is because a lot of people have a nature of being a people pleaser. They've always been that way of making sure the other person is taken care of above themselves. Some people have a low emotional maturity, which means it's definitely a lack of self-respect, but many people can't see it that way. If you are emotional mature, then you are able to keep your emotions intact better, and you are able not to give your emotions away so much or become so emotionally vulnerable to other people. I do believe that some people are naturally drawn to drama, but that's usually for a reason, and it's not so natural. It's just that you've been conditioned to it. So these are things and patterns that we have to learn for ourselves to change, because you'll never be able to change the other person. You'll only be able to continue working on yourself. So I do understand that it may be difficult to set boundaries, to change these patterns that you've been used to in the past. And listening to these other two therapists in their own way will help you break down more of how to make these changes and why it's important. So now, before I end the video, I do want you to leave me a comment, leave me some feedback, give me some information about what you're dealing with, or how you thought this information was helpful or not helpful, or what feedback can you add to it so that we can go further the next time. My email is ladydee41one@gmail.com. Leave a comment right below, and we look forward to hearing from you. Our mission is just to encourage you. It may be difficult to press through some of the changes that needs to be made to make ourselves better, to love ourselves more. But you have to remember what the most important goal is in mind, and that is to create the best person that you can be. So if that means leaving some people behind that are slowing you down, keeping you stagnant, then that's what it is. Otherwise, it's just about having a conversation and getting an understanding and letting people know this is the new me. Accept it or reject it. Either way, I'm going forward. Be encouraged, good people. Have a great day. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this video. Stay tuned. There's more. So first, I want to give shouts out to Julia Christina. She has a master's in psychology, and she is a registered clinical counselor in Vancouver, Canada.
So many people run into problems with boundaries when they think that they are using a boundary to change someone else. And you know how well that works because you've tried it. And generally, other people don't really want to be told what they have to do or not have to do. Right? Just like us, we don't like to be told what we have to do or not have to do. And so when that happens, when we start to feel controlled, we end up resisting, we end up getting annoyed, we end up maybe rebelling and doing more of the thing. Again, that does depend on the relationship and on the person. If someone is coming to you and saying, you have to do this or else, versus like, hey, when you do this, it really bothers me, I don't like it, I'm going to ask you to stop doing it, or you could be more mindful of this, or make an effort to not do it when I'm around, or whatever that is. So you can make a request, and hopefully there is a certain level of reciprocity and respect in those close relationships where people will be willing to respect that request. But the boundary comes in if they are not willing to do that. So if you need to continue doing this thing, if you need to continue to yell at me or criticize my life choices or stop by with unannounced, then this is what I will do. This is what I need to do to manage myself in this situation. So, an example, if you yell at me, you can yell. I'm not going to try and control you, but if you yell at me, I will walk out of the room. And if you follow me to the other room, I will leave the house and go on a walk until you are, willing to have a civil conversation in a moderate tone or whatever that is. So you can keep yelling. I'm just not available to stick around for it. Another example. If it's a family member or a friend or whoever who, when you are with them, they like to comment on your weight, your life choices, your relationship status, that's their prerogative. They might think those are perfectly reasonable things to talk about. You may not. You may not want to. You may not like that. And so that's okay, right? They might think it's okay. You don't think it's okay. But if they want to play in your yard, they have to follow your rules. But they don't have to follow your rules. It just means that then they can't play in your yard. So if someone brings up topics that you are not interested in talking about, then you simply don't engage in the conversation. And you can let them know, you can say, hey, I'm not interested in talking about my weight, my life choices, or my relationship status, or whatever the topic is. If you would like to talk about that, I am not going to engage in the conversation. I'm not going to answer questions about it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just not going to do it. Your choice, my choice. Your choice to bring up the topic, my choice to not participate in the conversation.
And the next person I'd like to give a shout out to is Nedra Glover. I think it's Nedra. Nedra Glover Todd. She is a practicing therapist, best-selling author. She is on many channels, and I will leave her links as well. Stay tuned.
And you were actually saying something, you were saying about in like the language you use with people and how you show up. And I pulled one of your posts that I really want to go deep into, because this is something that I personally struggle with, which I notice a lot of people do, where they're not necessarily being clear about what that boundary is or about how someone else's boundary is affecting them. And this goes to the second part of communication. And so I pulled a couple of things that you put. Sometimes the problem is, and I loved this post so much, and I'd love to go through a few of them, where you put, sometimes the problem is you allow them to vent without telling them you aren't prepared to listen. I was like, oh my God, that's so strong. So that goes back to, that's actually you problem, right? It's you haven't told them that you're not prepared to listen. How on earth do you do that?
I can't talk right now. I'm on my way to work. I'm about to start my day. This is not a good time for me. Is this something we can talk about later? Wow, I thought I was just answering the phone and it was going to be very light, but this sounds like something that has a lot of detail, and I actually was about to hop on a call. I think there are many ways to say, I can't talk about this thing. It sounds really big, and this is not the best time for me to get into it. Because there are some people who will call and they're just like, this is the problem, and they just go. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in line getting a sub. Like, I'm not prepared for this. And it has to be okay for us to have some limits around when we're able to talk about certain topics. And I think people can understand that. We assume they can't, that whatever they want to talk about, we're their only person in the whole wide world. And if we don't talk about it while we're standing in line, they won't have anyone. And that's typically not true. Because if I have a real problem, I have a few people, maybe not a ton, but I'm like, okay, she didn't answer. All right, she didn't answer. Okay, got one. Like, I found somebody. Got one now. Girl, you got a minute? All right, here. And I think it's important to ask people if they have the capacity, because sometimes people don't. I want to know if you're, in a store and you can't talk about something with me. So let me know. And lots of times when I ask that question, I've had people say, well, let me give you a call back in 10 minutes when I get back to my car. Or let me give you a call back this evening when I'm not, doing stuff with the kids. So they let me know when their energy will be available for me to really get into this issue. Because If it was a crisis, I think I would have called the police. So this is not, it's a life crisis, but it's not a crisis, right? And so this is something I probably could either find someone else, maybe go journal about, schedule a therapy session, and wait for that person to give me a call back so I can process that with them.
Yeah, I love that. But I also heard you in an interview, which is exactly how I felt. So this is why I wanted to bring out, because you said a lot of people interpret setting boundaries as being mean. And so when I read that post where it's like you allow others to vent without you saying, hey, right now I'm not prepared to listen. My fear is that people are like, yeah, but I need you now. Are you not going to be here for me? And so the fear of not being liked, the fear of not feeling like in fact, it's not even that, the fear of not feeling like I'm there for my friend is also so just overwhelming that even if I can't handle the emotion that's coming at me in that moment, I do just suck it up. And I don't know if that's actually a good thing to do. How do we overcome that thought of being a people pleaser, always trying to be perfect, always trying to be there for your friends or your partner or your parents, when it ends up possibly being detrimental to you? Because I'm really torn with that, because I love my family and my friends and my partner more than, life itself. So I get torn between those things.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we will always have ourselves, and then on top of that is everyone else. So the person that I have to please the most is me. It doesn't mean that what I need or what I want is more important than anyone else, but I certainly believe in self-care first, because I cannot care for anyone or anything before I care for myself.